Hey everybody, Paul Chin Jr. here, back with another episode of Talking Serverless. It's a pretty simple concept. We talk about things in the serverless world, and this week, this month, this episode, really excited to bring on one of my colleagues from Serverless Guru, Felipe, and what we're going to actually talk about. I guess first let me set the stage for you. There's like a small team kind of huddling around, doing stuff, trying to make improvements, but they all realize that it's the underlying infrastructure. It's like, how can they go to deploy this thing time and time and time again? And it's that terrifying loop that we'll be discussing with Felipe and the things that he's built. So without further ado, Felipe, welcome to the show.
Hey, Paul. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
So, like I mentioned, we're colleagues. So we work together at Serverless Guru, but you had started this project and it caught my attention because it was kind of unique, even though I fully understood what it was right away. Uh, so tell me about this Gothic framework you came up with, real quick.
To summarize, Gothic Framework is an inspired tool, inspired in Next.js, but for Golang developers. So it's a framework that enables Golang developers make full stack applications the same way or as smoothly as possible as it would be on a Next.js app. So you can deliver full stack apps with your backend and your front end pages with a similar syntax than with React, and at the same time having all the perks that Go can give you, like multi-threading and all that.
So, am I to believe that there hasn't been like a Next.js like thing in Golang up until now?
Yeah, exactly. Most of the full stack frameworks rely on JavaScript, and that's one of the things that always got me. I would say Golang is my favorite programming language, and I always worked with JavaScript due to this inability of Go to build full stack applications until then. And yeah, once I was researching a little bit about a new stack that came up for Go called the Goth stack, I realized that I could build something with it that would enable us to make full stack applications with Go.
Oh, very cool. Okay, so there's this thing that existed that other people have talked about called the Goth stack. So, and then you took those components of the Goth stack and turned it into a web app framework.
Yeah, exactly.
Ah, okay. That's pretty cool. And I guess I got so excited about the actual framework itself that now I'm going to take a chance to have you kind of introduce yourself a little bit and tell us how did you come to building this goth stack thing.
Yeah. So I've been working with serverless for quite a while now. So my first time that I ever seen serverless, that I first worked with serverless in my life, was in 2019 during some college projects. So for those that do not know, I have a bachelor degree in computer engineering, but I've been working in the software industry since the beginning of 2019 when I joined my college. And at first I was working with simple projects using the DynamoDB, Lambda, and API Gateway stack. You know, that simple one just for storing some data from IoT devices and all. But I quite enjoyed working with software, and then I started looking for an internship, eventually a job, a real job on the software industry, and I joined a software house. So there I could see a lot of technologies, a lot of programming languages. I worked with Flutter, Angular, and React, JavaScript, several services from Google Cloud, from AWS. I worked with Google Functions. I worked with AWS Lambda Functions. I worked with Firebase, Firestar.
Man, you tried them all.
Yeah, exactly. I had quite a experience there, and but I decided to focus a little bit more on the JavaScript environment and serverless environment after that. So I started working in a company that had marketing lives as a product. So they had huge clients such as Warner Bros, NBA, and we worked with lives, as I said, for marketing purposes, and we had to scale that. And first, we were working with EC2s, and it wasn't scaling enough. It wasn't doing the job, so we decided to migrate to serverless. And I had a really nice experience with API gating it WebSockets. So for broadcasting the events there. So it was quite new at the moment at the time.
You're talking about broadcasting live video, like streaming live video.
Oh no, the video was streamed by a CDN by CloudFront, but the events from the chat on the live or some events that would happen on the screen. So some of those events needed to be broadcasted from us from the admin panel to the users there. So for example, for an NBA game, if someone scored a basket, for example, we had to like send some emojis, something for the screen to happen for everyone, and we had quite a few problems with making JavaScript call all those API gateway endpoints for the WebSocket. So we had to work with Go there. It was my first time working with Go, but was really simple implementation, just to call all that, make that broadcast happen as smoothly as possible with threads.
So who came up with the idea to go? Was it you? Like was it like a like how did that come about, right?
Yeah, the CTO of the company there was studying serverless at the time, and actually it was quite cool because like he came with a lot of serverless guru blogs for us and sent us to study that and try to learn a little bit more about serverless at the time. That was I think 2020, 2021 ish. So it was quite cool like that I ended up working here. So I was like really impressed with how serverless would scale itself, like how AWS would manage everything, and we were struggling so much to manage lives up to 100,000 concurrent users. So that was a huge lives, and we were struggling so much to scale that, and Lambda and API Gateway WebSockets was doing just fine. We just had to solve this small problem on the broadcasting part, right? So yeah, that was quite an experience.
Okay. So if I'm hearing you right, the problem started in, first just managing all those concurrent connections. Then, by using serverless WebSockets, you increase the bandwidth. And at that point, your bottleneck was the JavaScript that was only single threaded. So then you realized you could do a multi threaded backend solution through the serverless WebSockets.
Yes. So what happened is when you use API Gateway WebSockets, when you wanna send one-on-one messages or small chats, room messages, it's quite fine because you have to send one HTTP request under the hood on the SDK for each connection ID. And to do that with JavaScript, you're probably going to use like a promise or something like that. And that was not performing after 10K concurrent users. So we had a lot of issues on that. And that was due to the JavaScript environment. So we were trying to do it in all the ways possible, like worker threads or anything that could work in the JavaScript environment. But in the end, our CTO made the call to use a Golang Lambda and use the Go power, let's say like that, the Go routines to make those threads easily and without even sweating. Like we did, like easily books of 10K concurrent HTTP calls, like without even sweating. And yeah, that was, let's say, my first touch with Go, like my first experience with that powers such ability of dealing with really with tasks that demand that much performance, right? And but it was quite, as I said, it was quite like simple, just one single lambda. Never worked with that until 1 year and a half later. So after this company, I, because of the experience that I had with such lives, like giant lives, and the experience with video on demand and all, I joined one of the biggest business schools in Brazil.
Okay, so tell me about how you got from Go to like this framework then, right? Because we've talked about this power of Go and how it is very performant, and you are able to match it up with the bandwidth that serverless infrastructure gives you. Well, we're talking about you building this framework thing. Like, what did you have to do? What was your realization?
All right. So, as I said, like I had a few experience with Go in the past on that video on Marketing Live video platform, but it was just the first touch. Like, was just the first experience with Go. Later on, I worked a little bit more for video streams for another platform, for a course platform, one of the biggest business schools in Brazil, and I was staff engineer there working and trying to make architect and develop the platform for the courses. And we had to use Go for a few critical missions there for streaming the videos and all. And that experience with streaming, HTTP, concurrency, Go, all that tied up together made Go one of my favorite languages. Yeah, years after that, 2 years I believe after that, I was always trying to learn a little bit more about Go, but I was working with JavaScript on my main job, right? So I always wanted to make that shift to Go or work more with Go in my pet projects and all that, but I couldn't because I always wanted to have the same ability to build full stack applications, right? So JavaScript always allowed me to, like, oh, I want to make a pet project of a new product, or I don't know, a new website for investments or something like that. Anything that crazy that comes to mind. And I couldn't do that with Go. I could do that with Go plus something else, plus React, plus Next, and something else. So I was always disappointed about this point, and there was a day that I was hearing to a live stream of a very famous YouTuber and Netflix engineer. You guys probably know who it is, but I was listening to one of his lives, and he mentioned the God stack and its pros and cons, right? And he was talking mostly about how we are giving too much responsibility to JavaScript. So he talks about the bundle size of the websites nowadays. You add like 2 or 3 libraries to your website, and you already have like 40 megabytes of bandwidth like coming to your website. That results in an awful user experience. He was always mentioning as well, like JavaScript was made for working on the client side for the responsibility of like handle events on the browser side. Like you shouldn't do that much with JavaScript. Like leave the responsibility for dealing with state, with data, on the back end, right? And he was always mentioning this new stack called Goth stack, which uses Go, Tailwind for CSS, Temple, which is basically a template library for Go that does a lot of sanitizing on the on the HTML, for so you don't have like injects or something like that. And Go basically serve an HTTP server with those routes, right? And it makes really easy, and it makes it look like React. So I started looking at this stack, and I was like, "Whoa, this has a lot of potential. That can solve a lot of those problems that I always been facing. Like I always wanted to build a full stack application with Go." So I saw that Gov works basically with server side rendering, like Next.js, which was my favorite framework for JavaScript. At the same time, I realized the experience of developing like Goth apps with the default community tools wasn't as pleasant. Let's say like that. You had to run a bunch of scripts all at the same time. So for developing, you had to run Tailwind on watch mode as in one terminal, and in the other terminal you would have to run Tempo on watch mode so you can make the changes and the pages were reflected. And on the other terminal, you would need to run your Go app, your Go server on watch mode with a library called Air, which is similar to NodeMon, right? So that was crazy, man. Those always came out of sync, and that wasn't like that was awful, right?
I can't imagine because when I think of a full stack experience, I think of a single runtime.
Exactly. And I was like, that's not ideal. Let's try to make it better. So I started creating Go scripts that call each other, like with a simple command like go run and then the file that I want. So just a bunch of scripts that tied it up together in a single command, right? So I could run just make dev, for example, and all those scripts would call each other, make it run in a single prompt in a single terminal, so I could develop my app faster. And I also had an idea. So I really like working with Lambda containers, custom environments, and all that due to my experience on previous jobs. I worked a lot of that kind of technology. And one of the things that I like the most about this technology with Lambda container images is that for compile languages such as Go, you can optimize the image to be as lightweight as 4 to 5 megabytes in Go's case. And that could result in like really small code starts, like 40 milliseconds ish, like 60 milliseconds of code starts. That's ideal for front end applications, as we want to deliver a page as fast as possible for your user, even more if they're attached to a CDN. So I decided to try that out and see how it goes. Right. So I compiled the binary of that Goth stack website, put it on a Lambda container, uh, and made it a Lambda URL attached to a CDN. And I tried to deliver the page. And the result was quite impressive. Like the page delivered faster than Next with Amplify. So I was like, wow, that's something.
Yeah, that is interesting because you've taken the fastest route to from server to client with the most amount of dynamism in the middle, right? Client's going to say, I need this route. It comes in directly to the Lambda function URL after a CDN hop. Is that right?
Yeah, you have your CloudFront there, and one of the origins is a Lambda URL.
Wow. So and then once it gets into the Lambda is pulling up this container image. Tell me more about Lambda containers because I guess it's weird to say, but like I'm just like a more classic serverless person who hasn't really thought about how will a container better my life, right? I kind of have always been, oh, if I need a container, like what am I really doing? So tell me about it because I want to learn from you.
So Lambda containers, as everything software, is a trade-off. So you're not following all the best design patterns for serverless infrastructure, but you receive a lot of options as well. So you have, in this case specifically, you can build a whole server into a Lambda, which is another anti-pattern, which is the mono Lambda, but it makes it simple. It makes it easier for you to deploy, and it makes it more familiar to other developers that are not used to serverless to work with it, right? So this is one of the main features that I think there is for Lambda containers. So you have common ground for all developers. Everyone that works with software works with Docker, right? If you're not working with Docker, you're probably doing something wrong because nowadays every single server, it's running in Docker. It's really pretty much the base stack for everything that works with backend applications. Like I do not see any scalable application without it. And it's a really opinionated decision, but I mean opinion, but I do think so. And it is, as I said, is a common ground, so everyone can work with it. And I wrote an article here at Serverless Guru about like how you can use that common ground to lift and shift to serverless. So, for example, if you are let's say a startup and you want to start working with serverless because you saw a lot of perks that serverless can provide you, but at the same time you have no idea how to follow the best practices or how to shift your EC2 code that's running on a Docker container to the Lambda or to serverless itself. So you could pretty much use that as a first step. Like just have your container there. You can attach something called Lambda Web Adapters, which is a binary written in Rust that the AWS Labs did for us. It's basically a proxy. It calls the Lambda APIs and makes a proxy for your container. So if you have an HTTP server on the port 8080 on your container, it will pretty much do the translation between those two layers for you, the Lambda layer and your application, right? So it makes it straightforward. You just add your server there, and that's working perfectly for the HTTP calls, right? So this is one really good perk about the Lambda container. Another one is not all databases can scale as much as a serverless database, even more for the connections, the database connections, like Postgres on AWS has the Aurora proxy that helps a lot, but other databases don't. So MongoDB, for example. So if you're working with Mongo and you're working with Lambda, and your application is scaling a lot, you're probably going to be facing a lot of connections on your database, and that's going to be an issue eventually. So working with Lambda containers can kind of mitigate that a little bit because you're not having one connection per endpoint that you have. Instead, you're having one connection per microservice in a Lambda container that you have. Obviously, you have more copies of that same container, but it's much less than one copy per endpoint.
That is an interesting way to think about scaling. So you had an article about that?
Not about the connections, but about the lift and shift.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's really funny because, you're talking about years ago, you're like your one boss brought an article from Serverless Guru, and now you're here writing them. There's probably somebody that's read your article just now and will be inspired to let us know how it goes.
Yeah, going back to the Gothic framework stuff. So basically, why I decided to go with Lambda containers, I wanted to make it as straightforward as possible. So it is a technology that uses a unusual HTTP server, like a regular HTTP server. So if I would like break it down into smaller lambdas that would go, each endpoint will be a lambda. That's going to be much more complex than just one single container that have a binary there. So I wanted to make it simple. I wanted to make it as easy to others to understand, right? Because one of the goals we've got with the Gothic framework is to make it open for others to add plugins, to add extensions, to customize the app as they wish. So that's why I made a lot of the decisions on the Gothic framework, and the Docker container is one of them. Because if you want to customize your container, your environment that you're using there, you can. If you want to add more infrastructure to the default one that comes with the Gothic framework, you can. Like I think I didn't mention here, but the Gothic framework integrates with AWS SAM, so you can deploy your apps as smoothly as possible. It is really inspired on the same integration that Next has with Vercel. You run one command, you log in with your AWS CLI, and then you do make deploy, pass your stage. That's done. You have a configuration file with all you want.
Yeah, it's interesting that for serverless development, I've always called it even fuller stack because there is this pressure from the front end to also do the work on the back end, right? To be responsible for data calls and to be responsible for managing those data calls. And that's where you've gotten, the bulk of your real production experience, right? It's in that area where so many client calls are coming in and they all need fresh data. Like you can't cache it, you have to have it in real time. How are you going to scale these things? Because even if there were another 100 people writing code for it, it doesn't solve the problem, right? So you've really kind of cut your teeth on this particular scaling problem. And I think that's really fascinating because in building the Gothic framework, it does have, I would call them strong opinions, right? It's saying when you build an app and you need this concurrency, use this because you'll save yourself some time, some effort. Um, and it's interesting that you took a look at what Next is, and then what was it like porting over those features, like the sort of like DX features as they call them, DevX, developer experience, all those buzzwords. Uh, when you take a look at something like Next.js, what were the things that you were like, okay, I gotta have those, and then what was it like porting it to Go?
Yeah. When I decided to inspire myself on Next.js, it was basically because I've experienced a lot of frameworks, and Next.js was the one that delivered two things that I liked the most, which is SEO optimization. So you can deliver pages optimized for the Google search engine, and you can, like make caching on specific pages and revalidate that on the background. Meanwhile, your users are receiving the cached version, so they don't realize that it's a cached version until the new one came. And that was a really nice feature from Next. I believe Next 12 or something like that, that I loved. I always loved that feature. Also, the capability of making server side rendering gave you a lot of power, right? So you could, as I said, create dynamic pages with static information. So one good example is I want to create a custom page for each user that I have, right? For each user that joins my community or something like that. And with Next, you can pretty much do that. You can cache that page for each new call that comes to the backend and use that. And that can be delivered as fast as possible to the user. So SEO optimization and developer experience, like all developers, when they are trying to create a new application, they want the smoothest experience as possible. So, for example, the path routing is something that really comes up to my mind when I think about developer experience on the Next.js environment. So I tried to get the features that I saw during my career that made Next.js become what it is right now. So it is a huge framework. A lot of people know it, a lot of people love it, and they mostly do because of the things that it does with React to make it easier, to make it smooth, to make it, like just create it, create your app, make your simple Lambda functions there, your functions that will be eventually become a Lambda function, and your pages, and like the simplicity with the SEO optimizations and all that. So I was inspired on those main two features: the simplicity, the things that it makes easier on React, and at the same time the SEO optimization. So I started with some features for optimization. For example, the SEO optimization, for example, the images. So Next.js basically get all the images that you export to the public folder and creates smaller resolution version of that. So once it loads the image, it loads the lower resolution first. So the image comes first to your page. You see it a little bit blurred, and then it transitions smoothly to the original one. So that can make the SEO increase and also give the user a really good experience on the page. So that was the first feature that I developed. It's basically a lazy loading, so it wasn't as hard. I did it a little bit manually at first, and I started trying to make a component out of it, make it as smooth as possible for the users to use. And then I started working with the configurations for the caching. So for example, to make the static pages be cached on a CDN, I had to integrate that. That's where I had to use CloudFront and Lambda URL. So I started to connect those and cache the page on the CDN. And I made a POC to try to see, well, if I can do the same feature that Next does with that static revalidation. So you cache your page, and in the background, when the cache is expired, you create another one and keep giving the cache version. So a lot of those features are already implemented with the same stack, or with the same stack with CloudFront and then a Lambda, for example, but they are done for with Amplify and Next.js integration, right? They do that in the background. So I tried to replicate that, and it actually worked. So I was like, oh, okay, we might have been found something. We might found something here. That might be a possibility of having um, an optimized deployment tool here that could be easy to build with AWS SAM, right?
That is interesting because, you know, you've taken a look at Next and Vercel, and Vercel runs on top of AWS. Like when you're using a Vercel function, it's a Lambda function, but they've gotten the developer experience to a point where that's where people are going to go first. And then for you to take a look at what it's doing and re-implementing it yourself, was there any point where you had to like, did you look at their source code for help, or like was everything once you started looking at it, did it did you kind of build it like naively at first, or what was that like?
Yeah, I'm an open source lover, let's say like that, and a lot of those codes, not from Vercel, but from the Amplify integration with Next.js, a lot of those are in GitHub, right? And I helped in a few cases there with a few issues now, and I had a little bit of, like a feeling how that worked, due to some responses that I received from the team there while debugging or solving some issues. So for example, I had in the past a problem with caching files on the API routes for Next.js on Amplify. And from one issue and one response that I received there, basically um, the maintainer there said you can just pass those headers, that's going to work perfectly. So like those kind of things that you can cache and say, oh, okay, so CloudFront probably when receiving those headers will cache this page, and like keep that cached until the new version comes. So this kind of situations made me have it's more of a feeling of how it works in the background, and other architectural concepts, right? So some of those things, as I'll explain a little bit later, I believe. But the Gothic framework is a quite simple infrastructure, right? It has basically S3, CloudFront, and one Lambda URL. That's it, right? So some concepts are simple, like your static files will go to an S3 bucket that will be connected to a CDN, right? For your dynamic routes or your routes that uses the server, you just make another origin and attach that to your CloudFront, and essentially you're gonna cache everything that goes from S3, and you're not gonna cache, or you're gonna decide if you want to cache stuff coming from your Lambda. And took me a little bit of research and a few tries, a few POCs to like deliver that dynamic caching on CloudFront side.
That's interesting because now When people look at Next.js, they don't automatically see like a vendor in it, inside of it. And this vendor question comes up all the time in cloud architecture and in cloud engineering because, how coupled are you to an implementation? And it's interesting because at a certain point, like with this Gothic framework that you've built, it has built on top of it, like you use SAM underneath, which is managing the deployments and the infrastructure. Because of your experience with serverless, it just sort of all kind of melded together. It just works together, right? But can you tell me about how you've put together the infrastructure side? Like, how coupled are they? Are people able to, you know, pick out different services for their infrastructure with Gothic? Let's talk a little bit about the deployment targets.
Yeah, so this is the default infrastructure basically. So, but it is quite simple to extend that or to modify that. I kept a template within the project in a folder called .gothic framework, and in there you have your SAM template. So you can add more resources to it as you would for a normal SAM app, or you can modify it. There are a few Golang template logic there, a few ifs, else's. When you want to add some information, it's going to map for your environment variables that come from your configuration file and put it in there. So basically, you can extend that. And also, like in the end, the Gothic framework is basically a Go binary, so you can run it everywhere if you want to. So I decided to make it easier on AWS serverless to so you can deploy it with a single command there, and that works perfectly. It scales. After all, it's AWS serverless. But if you wanna, for example, deploy it in Google Cloud, you could pretty much use a bucket, a CDN, and Cloud Run. That would work as well. You put the CDN in front of your server and the bucket. The concept is the same. Or if you want to manage that yourself, you want to have servers in all the edge regions. If you want you want to run a Redis cache in there, you want to like do it all yourself, you can do it as well. It's just a binary. In the end, it's it's a simplification of the Goth stack with a tool that helps you deploy that as well in a way that will scale and it will achieve your goal as fast as possible. One of the major advantages of serverless is the time to market, is the focus on your business logic instead of focusing on infrastructure. You kind of delegates that to AWS, for example, or your cloud. And the idea is the same. So developing Goth apps is not as straightforward. With the Gothic framework, it makes it simpler. It gives a lot of perks on top of it. So you have your caching made it easier. You have your all the features that the Goth can provide you, the SEO optimizations. And if you want to deploy it, you can deploy it anywhere, or you can, like log in into AWS CLI and deploy it into AWS as well. It's up to you. I keep it really open for anyone to, like if they want to create plugins for the Gothic framework to deploy that same infrastructure in GCP or other clouds. It's up to the community. It's open source after all. I am an AWS expert, a serverless AWS expert, so I'm gonna make it as smooth as possible for the environment that I'm confident of. You know.
Perfect. Yeah. It is interesting to hear about just like the speed at which you can do things, right? And now that you've built this framework and you've got all this experience with the AWS as a backend, it does feel like, okay, it makes sense to start taking advantage of all the things that will play well together, right? You have a need for a templating backend that can be generated dynamically. So you have a very small binary listening behind a single CDN that you control. It seems pretty speedy to me. And because Go has internal concurrency, it can scale inside the runtime, I guess, right? Like as you make more calls on that binary, it just continues to handle them in parallel, right?
No, actually, the way the Lambda will work is the same as always. So one request per container. The thing is that you have more possibilities within the runtime while receiving a request. So, for example, if you have a task or an endpoint that has to do a lot of computational heavy work, right, in parallel. So, for example, calling multiple places, doing multiple stuff at the same time, and before returning the response, that will help you a lot, and it's also memory optimized compared to JavaScript, for example.
I see. Okay, I was thinking of it. So, yes, that's perfect. I'm glad you explained it that way because I only know about JavaScript land. Like I only do JavaScript TypeScript stuff. And so the idea of how Go kind of works is definitely outside of my dailies, but I can see now where that is possible for you to scale because you are able to actually compile it down to the smaller binary, right? Like it's just more, like you said, more memory efficient.
Exactly. Not only more memory efficient, but you can let's say that you cannot compare one to one the promise all from JavaScript than with Go routines. Like Go routines usually span like one key KB of memory because it is a green thread. Well, that's how we call it. And a normal thread, like the worker threads from JavaScript, or like if you do a promise all, for the case of the worker threads from Node.js specifically, that's gonna spend at least 1 megabyte per thread. That's the bare minimum for most languages, and for the languages that implement the green threads, it's 1 KB. So many times less. So, for example, if I want to make 1,000 threads, 2,000 threads, 10,000 threads, that's gonna not gonna eat much memory. That's gonna eat like, I don't know, like 1 gigabyte, 1.5 gigabyte. And if you do that for a Node.js environment, you're gonna probably gonna spend like 100 gigabyte. You're gonna reach the cap on 10 gigabyte on the Lambda, right? So you can do a lot of stuff in parallel. Go is a language that was developed with that in mind, with this new web, this new technology in mind. Like most of those languages like JavaScript, Python, C, most of those were Java, most of those were created in a time where computers were single threaded, right? They had one CPU, and Go was created later on and they decided to create a language to embrace this new world, these new capabilities of multi-threading, multi-CPUs. So it is designed to do that in a way that it does not spend as much memory, in a way that it can run CPU intensive tasks without like having issues with that. Like threads are really optimized for the Go environment.
Interesting. So I would say that since you have, this really deep understanding of the Go language, the runtimes, and you've packed it all together. It made me wonder, like how far into like platform territory are you with something like the Gothic framework? Like I hear Gothic framework, and then I look at it, and then it's telling me this is more like a this feels more complete than just like a web framework. Tell me about that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say the Gothic framework is really a really new idea. It came like November last year, so came up in November last year. So I'm quite developing it just yet, but I'll agree. I will agree with you on the part that is it is getting size. It is getting like a lot of more features into it. I'm really into the idea of building a whole environment, development environment around surrounding it, like making it easier for others to understand. Some plans that I do have for that is to create other open source projects with the Gothic framework and enable that for the community. So, for example, as I said, I worked a lot with video streaming. So, what if I create a full platform for video streaming only using the Gothic framework, and I put it open source on GitHub so everyone could use. So, all right, I want to have an like a streaming platform. I can just download that project. I can run make deploy, and I can have my project there, then my full web going up there with more plugins than the community can give it. So I'm thinking more of doing that, trying to do that. But I think the Gothic framework has to become a little bit more mature so I can do that. Like have more features. I have a huge amount of features that I want to add it to the Gothic framework yet. So integration with VPC, integrations with WAF, integrations with eventually with Fargate as well. Not everyone likes Lambda containers, and maybe you want to have other different types of connections, not only HTTP. You want to have WebSockets, want to have GCP or something like that, right? So probably try to integrate that with Fargate as well. See if that's possible. Make it work. Like those kind of features. I don't know. It's still really new. It's still really fresh into my mind. It was quite a nice feature, and the way that it became like it basically became my favorite stack. Like right right after like POC time was ending. Like after finishing the POC and seeing that work, and it worked like as well as Next.js or and even better for some cases. I was like, that's what I was looking for. Like an app that can have the power of a Go backend and at the same time develop like applications on the front end as well. So
I did appreciate the use of HTMX, and it doesn't take long to understand what temple is. I'm familiar with Next. I write React begrudgingly. I can do it if I have to, but in looking at the docs that you have on the Gothic docs, it's very clear. Like, okay, here's your templating language. Here's your for everything in key, spit out a div. So all of that made a lot of sense. The part that I needed the most amount of help with was the Go part, and it's funny when I try to learn a new language because at this point I can see through the language a little bit, but then when I go to actually do it, there's like 5 or 6 different gotchas that I would have never been able to figure out. Dependency trees and setting up tools and that kind of stuff. But for somebody who's already good with Go, this is definitely like a new approach. And I love that you've made it kind of serverless first. And I think for frameworks and for stacks that we're seeing from here on forward, they're definitely serverless first. I think it's pretty much the only way to fly. And I wanted to ask you next about, you built this thing, this framework. We're talking about deploying these apps. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of concurrency models. Um, you know, what's it like for you to apply the Gothic framework to like real life startups or or larger organizations? Like, how do we get running faster because of this?
yeah, I would say for startups and for big corps, the approach is different, but you can definitely use that for both. For big corps, they usually buy the innovative products from mature startups, right? They don't innovate themselves. They usually go for the safer path. So they really appreciate cost optimization, reliable infrastructure, and predictability on costs, right? So that's usually what big corps are looking for, and serverless can definitely deliver that. So I will go for that point when you're talking about using the Gothic framework or any serverless product for big corps. As for startups, they're looking more for like fast development, fast ability to pivoting your product, right? And generous free tiers to test, to make MVPs, to like I work most of my life on startups, so I know pretty much how it is. Like you want to make it as cheap, as fast to like go to marketing, focus on the business logic, see, validate that product, see if that works, and if it doesn't, pivot that to another product as fast as possible, make errors, like make mistakes as fast as possible to correct them. So this is I can talk a little bit more about it because of my experience working mostly with startups. But with big corps, when I worked with them, I saw more of this like safety first, reliability, like confidence on the like predictability, and that can be easily delivered by the serverless pricing model, for example, like pay per use. So you have, how many requests you have per month, so you can estimate how much is going to be costing you, and that's going to scale no matter what, because it's AWS doing the job for you. So yeah, I would say the Gothic framework as a serverless product will have those advantages for both cases, right? So if you have, for example, you have a website that you want your users to have the best optimized SEO possible, and the user experiences as the best user experience as possible. So you can deliver that and you can trust that, because in the end, is AWS doing that for you there. So it's the CDN from AWS delivering the pages as fast as possible, and the predictability on the cost as well. As for a startup, it is a Docker container, so you can pivot that whatever you want to in the future. You have this flexibility. You can build your app there in Go and can deliver your pages. You can have a generous free tier from AWS on your Lambdas there, so you don't have to worry about like hiring a DevOps to take care of your deployments and your scalability, because AWS is doing that for you. So in both scenarios, I think the Gothic framework can shine by using different perks for each scenario, for each client specifically.
It is a good way to look at the same thing from two different points of view, right? Like you make such a great point by saying that enterprises, they are purchasing innovation. They have the capital to leverage in order to kind of buy their way up the tech tree and just move past the R&D, move past sort of the growing pains. But with startups, it's the opposite side. They're looking at the same technology, serverless or these cloud vendored runtimes, and they see it as a way to catch up to the large corporations who are just throwing money around in order to solve the problem. And that's why I find serverless just so fascinating, both just as a technologist. It's a very interesting place for developers to be aware of. And that's why we have this show. And I love doing this show. And, we've had a really great conversation now. And man, I could talk to you about architectures pretty much all day. But I do have to end with the most important question of all. And this one, I give a lot of thought to. This is very serious.
Yeah, go for it. Let's go.
This is the real gut wrenching question. Now it's like, what was the most unexpected piece of good advice you've ever been given?
Yeah, I would say the best advices that I ever received were from books. Like I read a lot. So I would say there are a lot of books, interesting books, like the one from Ray Dalio called Principles. And one of the best advices, and one I like quotes a lot. So one of the quotes that,
But like unexpected.
yeah, he usually says, if you truly believe in what you're doing, and that's right, that's going to make a lot of success. Don't fall for other opinions, because all the other ones will just say your idea is great after you have your success. They're always going to have applause when you have success, but meanwhile you're struggling, they're not going to do anything. So if you trust in your idea and you truly believe that's going to be a great idea, go for it. Like, don't fall for others' opinions on that. Obviously, you can pivot your idea, but never lose your North Star, right? If you believe that's the path, go for it. Make changes to the path, but follow your North Star until you reach your goal. So that's something that I usually take for my life. That's something that I took while developing the Gothic framework. A lot of people say, like, well, working with Go and front end, wow, why are you using Lambda containers? Why, like, a lot of questions, a lot of doubts. And I always thought about how that could be a really great product, a really great framework. And I'm really happy with the results now. And I'm starting to receive the compliments that I should have received in the beginning, So it's normal. It's quite normal. Every successful path comes with struggle at first. So if you believe in your dreams or in like anything that you think is right, go for it. That's actually on the book, and I really like that idea.
Man, that's that self drive, that self conviction, holding yourself with self esteem, right? I tell people when they've done a good job, they should feel proud of themselves for what they have done. And when I first saw your presentation on Gothic, I was like, oh, this is cool. And then I saw how you would put it all together. I was like, oh, that's very clever. And then it took me another actual hands on keyboard time to actually go through the examples, understand what you were bringing to the development environment, and that's why we're having a conversation today, because I think that our listeners uh, are definitely open. Like, I find that serverless engineers in general are going to be more open because like we have to answer all of those questions, and I feel even better when I get questions about like what is serverless still. It's like, okay, I still got a job to do, I still have people to educate, we still have examples to make, we still have new tech tools, we still have new things to iterate upon. And that is probably the most exciting part about all of this, right? If you are a small team and you're trying to get things done, there are answers. If you're a huge mega corporation and you have to figure out how to stay ahead of who knows what, well, there are answers as well. So, very cool, man. Man, that was a great outlook on life, and I think the uh weighting towards action, weighting, like putting all of your weight towards leaning into more of what you do and what you know, that's what makes this craft so beautiful sometimes, right? Cool. Well, I think we do have to wrap up, but before we go, Felipe, can you tell our listeners where to find this framework and where they can connect with you?
Sure. So you can the framework is open source, so basically you can find it on GitHub. So it's Felipe GENEF / Gothic Framework. So github.com Felipe Genef / Gothic Framework. This is the repo. You can pretty much add any features you like in there. I'll look at them. I'll with like with. Well, it will be a pleasure to have more contributors, to have more plugins, more ideas. I really enjoy building the Gothic framework, and I hope this framework becomes a major framework within the community that will enable and open doors for Golang developers to have a space on the full stack world as well. So basically, you guys can find me at my LinkedIn as well. It's Felipe Gene de Faria. I believe you can leave it in somewhere in the
We
video.
will make a show note and people will be able to get to you there for sure. Also, I think I can just Google like Gothic Framework Go and it comes up pretty well.
Yeah, as a SEO optimized, we use the tool.
You know, you walk the walk, you talk the talk. It is what it is how it goes. And with that, Thanks, Felipe, for joining us today and having a chat about all things Go and cloud and serverless and mind altering quotes about doing what you really believe in. And that is a good segue to today's and every episode's proud sponsor, Serverless Guru. We really believe in what we do, which is guide our clients through the cloud, whether they're on AWS or not. Our engineers and architects are so good at figuring out solutions to today's craziest problems. And it's not just AI. We got lots more to share with folks if you go to serverlessguru.com or sls.guru. And with that, thank you all for checking in. Leave a comment below. Every little bit of engagement helps. Hit subscribe, hit the button, do all the things, leave a review. And with that, may your DNS resolve and your caches bust. We are out. Thank you.